The purpose of this meeting, one of the main purposes is to just give the project recap, what was the base of this construction in the project, the construction update, what will be the process, and we will have a discussion time, what we learned from phase one and the process. And at the end, we will have a question and answer session. So for question and answer, you can write your question on the chat box, or you can raise your hand just to have some basic ground rules. Respect and good behavior is expected from everybody. And also your question or comment has to be relevant to the subject, what we are talking. And feel free to write your question in chat box. If we have time, we will try to get through. If there is a lot of question, definitely we will get back to you in writing, responding to your question. And this is not the only meeting we will have. We will have multiple stakeholder meeting. If you have any question, if we didn't get back, you will have more time to ask your question and get some response. For project recap, the project location is Bryant Avenue South reconstruction. Bryant Avenue South full reconstruction between 50th and Lake Street. But by doing that, we were supposed to change some of the intersection improvement on Lindale to move transit. So we did last year, we completed Lindale intersection improvement, and phase one Bryant reconstruction from Lake to 42nd was completed last year, substantially completed last year. So just to remind the existing condition, the street was 60-year-old and it's was in really bad shape. And people were using it in different ways. People walk, bike, as you can see from the picture. So the proposed design was including and everybody will be able to use it. General project scope of 2023, we will have the new roadway, ADA ramp, sidewalk, off-street bikeway, and when we are doing the road improvement, we take advantage to improve some of our old utility, sanitary, storm, and water. And we will have landscape, green structure, street lighting, and signal for location for this year improvement. Construction staging, as I mentioned, we finished Lindale intersection improvement and Bryant from 50th and 42nd is substantially completed. So this year we will construct from 42nd up to Lake. We have two staging for this year, 42nd to 35th will be the first stage. And that once we are substantially completed on that block, we will move to 35th to Lake Street. Stage 2A, the one from 42nd to 35th will start April 10th, next Monday.
Membara, can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah.
I'm just watching the questions coming into the chat, and there's a relevant question to your slide right now. I think people are wondering when I think it was Route 23 bus will be rerouted with your initial construction stage here. So if you could talk about that now, it might be a good time.
Yes, we, as I mentioned, I will have stakeholder meeting every week. That's the time I will update recent and current situation. As of now, I would say in mid to end of May, but I would encourage sign up for project update and attend this weekly meeting because as you can see the next slide, there will be a lot of unforeseen and weather condition which we will not be able to finish as planned. So as I mentioned, there is a lot of unforeseen and then the things we can't control like weather and underground surprise. When we dig, we may have seen any conflict or unforeseen any utilities. So those things take time to coordinate. So that's some of the reason the schedule may change. Coordination work, there are old center point pipe, so those pipe will be removed. So you will see center point or their subcontractor. There will be Xcel Energy relocation in the removal existing power and all communication. There are some location which is in conflict with our new design, so they will come in to do some of their facility improvement or relocation. So our city right-of-way is usually from 2 to 4 behind sidewalk. If you have a sprinkler system, decorative paver, flower, please reach out. And most probably we may affect those sprinkler systems. So I encourage you to just relocate before the construction. If you would like to talk to me, my contact and our chief building inspector contact will be on the bottom of the presentation, so you can reach out. Also in project website, please let's talk and we can coordinate about removing, but it will be your responsibility, individual people responsibility to remove that. So if you have seen any or experiencing any sanitary or water service line, this will be the good time to coordinate with the project, and you will be able to upgrade, and you will save time, and you will save money because you don't have to repave. It will be coordinated with project. So if you have any issue with your private utility connection, please call me as soon as possible. That way we can coordinate with the project. So during the majority of construction, local access will be maintained, both for pedestrian and vehicle. So please let me know if there is an issue. There will be some disruption for driveway apron. It will take from 7 to 10 days, but we will communicate with individual property owner when you will have your driveway apron in construction. So it's just informal. Otherwise, we will let you know when it's time to do your driveway. So I will encourage bus detour. Please, Metro Transit will have really updated information. So please check the Metro Transit website, and they will give you most of the update information. Typical hour is from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Because we have a lot to get done, the contractor may work up to 8 p.m. for most of majority time. I will communicate as soon as possible or every week, but the typical hour could be up to 8 p.m. So maybe some of you already looked at there is traffic control setup, at least advanced warning is in place. Starting next Monday, we will have a detour sign. It could be at this time, I don't expect we will have a pedestrian detour, but I just want to mention this is a pedestrian detour. This is for the vehicle detour. So if you have any question, please let me know. So this is the majority of the information construction. As I said, there will be multiple meetings, so you will be able to reach out to me or chief field inspector if you have particular questions. So with this, I will hand to Jen.
Thank you, Membara. Okay, so we have a lot of people in this meeting, and we have a lot of questions coming into the chat. I am going to walk through. Membara, could you advance the slide for me? I am going to walk through what Public Works is proposing for revisions to the design, because I know that's why many of you are here today. As Membara noted, could you just go back one slide quick, Membara? As Membara noted, the meeting you're in today is the first meeting for this construction season of a weekly construction update meeting. I would encourage all of you who may be affected by the construction activities to continue to attend these meetings to get your weekly construction updates and or sign up for the updates that will come to you through email if you sign up for those. We are prepared to talk today about the proposed design revisions, but I want you all to know that this is not your only opportunity to share your thoughts with us and ask your questions. Public Works is planning to host another meeting or series of meetings with the community to discuss the proposed design revisions. So I want to make sure everyone understands that going into the conversation today. As I said, the things in the chat, the questions in the chat are really kind of blowing up, and I don't know if we'll get to everything today. So I don't want you to feel like you won't have an opportunity to have those questions asked and answered. We're going to start with phase 1, which was under construction last year, and some of the feedback that we got from phase 1. So Membara, please advance the slide. So Bryant Avenue phase 1 was constructed last year, and Public Works began to receive feedback before the construction season even really was finished. The Bryant Avenue design, it was one of the first design that we developed under the guidance of the TAP and the Street Design Guide. The design included several innovative design treatments and creative solutions to the design challenges presented by this constrained corridor. And since then, we've learned a lot from the project so far, and we'll continue to learn from this project and others. So as I said, we started to receive feedback before last year's construction season even ended. Feedback was coming from the public, it was coming from our emergency services providers, it was coming from our own staff. And some of the things that we're hearing is that the tightened up roadway design was making it very challenging for our emergency vehicles to pass through the street. Snow plowing operations were challenging as well. We have some pictures to share with you. Residents were having problems just being able to pull in or back in and out of their driveways. The tight turning radii just were not working for them. And there were challenges with people being able to get in and out of their parked vehicles, especially those vehicles that would have been parked on the left or driver's side of the vehicle. Go ahead and advance the slide, Membara. So here's just a couple of pictures of the challenges our fire department experienced in just trying to drive down the road. It is important that we have a design that provides adequate access for emergency services providers. Next slide. And here is Public Works trying to plow snow this winter. Now I'm going to acknowledge up front, we had a historic winter, top 3 ever. However, the challenges that we saw with snow really started making themselves apparent before we even had those historic snow amounts out on the street. And you'll see this is a pickup truck. This isn't even one of our full-sized plows. Next slide, please. The left or driver's side parking, again, this is before any snow is on the ground, and you can see where sometimes vehicles are just not getting as close to the curb line as they possibly could. So this further narrows what we've already narrowed in the street design. And also, the parking right up against the driveway aprons makes it very challenging for those who are trying to turn in or out of their driveway aprons to do so safely. Next slide. Here's another example of the driveway access concerns that got the white vehicle there right up against the turning radii, and then the vehicles parked across the street. It just made it very, very difficult for people trying to use their driveways. And frankly, we missed this in the design. I'm just going to put that out there. We missed this. We do look at turning movements when we do our design, and we missed this detail when we were doing that. Next slide, please. Here's another vehicle attempting to back out. The snowbanks made it more difficult, exacerbated the issue, but didn't necessarily create the issue. Next slide, please. All right, so we are going to move into a summary of the design modifications that we are proposing. Next slide, please. And I'll just start by saying that the revised design does not substantially change the project goals. It doesn't change the project goals at all, but it also does not substantially change what is included in the project. The proposed changes will maintain pedestrian and bicycle modal priority in the corridor while addressing the feedback that we've been receiving. The revised design maintains traffic calming and safety design features while improving access for emergency vehicles. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a cross-section of the original design for Bryant Avenue. We have the 12-foot drive lane, an 8-foot parking lane, 5.5 feet of green boulevard, a 10-foot bike lane, and a 6-foot sidewalk. And then on the other side, we have the 6.5-foot boulevard with a 6-foot sidewalk. This is a representative block between 41st and 42nd Street. Next slide, please. The revised design will look very, very similar. We'll continue to have the 12-foot drive lane, the 8-foot parking lane, the 10-foot bikeway, and a 5.5-foot sidewalk. So there's a slight change there. We're moving the green boulevard so that it lies between the bikeway and the sidewalk. And on the other side, we'll have a 5.5-foot boulevard and a 5.5-foot sidewalk. Next slide, please. So that everyone can see these compared on the same slide. So you can see we're overall same dimensions for a representative block. So we're maintaining our designated pedestrian and bicycle space along the corridor. We're maintaining intersection safety improvements and narrowed crossing distances, which I'll show you on a plan view in a second. We're maintaining the protected bicycle facility at sidewalk level. We are adjusting the location of the green boulevard space. We are maintaining traffic calming elements with our narrowed travel lane, as well as mid-block traffic calming elements. And I'll show you those in a second. We will be widening out driveway aprons, and we will be maintaining all parking on the west or passenger side of the street. Now, there's lots of things in the chat right now questioning the parking. We are not increasing the number of parking stalls with the design revisions. The number of parking stalls will be about the same as what was in the council adopted layout. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of what the design includes that I just read off for you all. Next slide, please. All right, so here is a representative block in plan view. This was the original design. You can see the bump outs at the intersections. You can see the chicanes in the middle of the block. You can see how the various elements lay out in plan view. Next slide, please. And here is that same block with the revised design. So we continue to have bump outs at intersections. And in this case, we have a mid-block bump out instead of the chicane. And we have them side by side for comparison. So I will note that in the original design, the chicanes serve to manage traffic speeds, but they also are shifting the parking from one side of the street to the other. In the revised design, we no longer need to shift the parking from one side of the street to the other. So the bump outs are proposed to help with the speed management along the corridor. And in both cases, chicanes and bump outs help create additional green space along the corridor. One thing the revised design does have are additional bump outs approaching certain intersections that were not part of the original design. So there are 6 of those included. There are a couple of blocks that we are not touching or making any changes to at all. And those are the blocks between 38th and 36th Streets. Next slide, please. So the process of moving forward, we're having the conversation today. We are going to be having additional meetings with the public to answer questions. We are continuing to work on our design revisions and make adjustments to that. We're really in a design build phase right now with construction starting already on Monday. And we're handing the contractor revised design plans as quickly as we can get them done. And with that, I am going to pause and open the floor up for questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Otherwise, Ryan or Ted, could we have someone moderate and read questions from the chat for us to answer and respond to? And could we have someone maybe pull up, monitor the raise handing and call on names when we're ready? Ryan or Ted?
Hello. Ted, do you want to moderate the hands? I'll look at the questions.
Yes, will do.
So Jenny, I'll just start with one question was, how are the issues identified with phase one going to be corrected?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we do believe that we will be making some adjustments in phase one. So right now we're very focused on phase two because we have a contractor who's going to be starting construction on Monday. And we will be continuing to evaluate our options for some adjustments to address the concerns in phase one. More information on that coming at a later date.
We've had a number of questions about why this isn't going to council for approving the layout.
That is a good question. And the revised, this is not going back to city council for layout approval because the design revisions continue to align with the project goals, continue to align with our TAP and street design guide, and do not substantially change what is included in the original design.
Thanks, Jenny. We had a question about, is there a buffer between the bikeway and the street?
Yes. So the bikeway will have a buffer of 3 feet between the curb of the street and the edge of the bikeway, which is 1 foot more than what is recommended in our street design guide.
Thank you. Ted, why don't you call on some individuals for their questions?
Okay, we can have Gretchen Puck speak.
Hi, I was just curious, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
How this impacts the taxpayers, this modification?
So are you referring to special assessments or taxes in general?
Well, so the property taxes for this area where this is being done, our property taxes were going to go up over several years. It was going to be, laid out over several years. And so does this bump this up? Because
it does not.
Needing to do the modifications?
It does not.
Well, where are they getting the money to do that?
So we are still evaluating the cost differences, but those will be funded through the city's capital program, which is your special assessment for the project will not change.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Beth.
Hi, I noticed you said that the buffer is 3 feet and the recommendation is 2, and you've reduced the size of the sidewalk by 1/2 foot on each side, and the green space has been reduced. I looked very cursory look at the ADA requirements for sidewalks, and it says 5 feet of setback, 6 feet of curb face, but the Minnesota Department of Transportation said 7 feet minimum. So I don't know exactly what it is, but I would rather have less concrete. You know, if people who are bikers are concerned about this, can we diminish that to 2 feet and then add that to the green space that's being taken away?
That is a really good question and something we will continue to look at as we finalize our design details. So again, we're working very, very quickly on this. I do think there may be an opportunity to shift some of that extra 1 foot width to those other areas. What we want to make sure is that we have enough space against the street for signs where the bicyclists do not feel the signs are not encroaching within the bikeway. So that's something we'll continue to evaluate, but I do think your comment is a good one. Thank you.
Next speaker up is Timothy.
How is getting rid of chicanes not a significant design change when that is a key component of traffic calming? And why is this project not getting delayed until next year and allowing for further public analysis?
So thank you for the question. Chicanes are a traffic calming element, as are bump outs. So we are proposing to replace some of the chicanes with bump outs. It will also provide that traffic calming element and the additional green space for the corridor.
Okay, next speaker up is Patrick.
So you can still go in a straight line with a bump out, whereas a chicane, you cannot. I mean, that is a huge difference in terms of traffic calming. My other concern with this is construction starts on Monday, and we're just talking about these changes now. That is asinine. It's absurd that Margaret and Anderson Keller is not here right now. And none of the mayor staff is here. I mean, this is being forced through, and frankly, this is disrespectful to this residents of the city. Very, very embarrassing for Public Works and the city of Minneapolis.
I'm sorry that you feel that way, but thank you for your comments.
The next speaker up is Evan Tobin.
I am muted. Oh, okay. Hi. So I own my house on Bryant Avenue South, and I'm wondering why you didn't inform homeowners of these changes prior to construction taking place. I have not received a letter or anything. And then my second question is, my block and the block south of me don't have any driveways. Why are there driveway changes being made when driveways do not exist?
So thank you for your question. We are just making some decisions and getting these design plans done, which is why you haven't yet received notice. So the letter that went out Friday is the first notice. This meeting today was not intended to cover this topic, although it became very clear to us that this topic was going to come up. So you're really kind of right on the front edge of us trying to get the information out and share it with the community. That's why you hadn't got anything yet. Where there are no driveways, there won't be adjustments to the driveway width, for example. So that's only happening where we have the driveways and that access issue is we need to adjust for that.
Okay, the next speaker up is Rob Cooney.
Hello. You've acknowledged that there were some challenges to phase one, and I had some questions about, the different things in mind that you folks had, planned for fixing some of those issues. I think the most important of which to me is emergency vehicle access. Given how parking is currently designed, given the tendency in Minnesota for snowbanks to get very, very high in the winter months, it's quite obvious to me that in the event that some people were legally parked in a certain place and my house were to light on fire, that I would actually be at risk of not having support from an emergency vehicle in a situation like that. So at the same time, you tell me that your focus is now on phase two. Do you acknowledge that there is a safety risk to residents in situations like mine?
Thank you for the comment. One of the bigger concerns that did come out of what we're seeing in phase one is emergency vehicle access and the ability of our emergency services providers to get where they need to go. We will be taking another look at phase one. There clearly are areas where emergency vehicles are having problems making it where they need to go along the street. It's one of the main drivers for us making the changes in phase two. We haven't had a chance to take a really close look at phase one yet because we had to focus on phase two. So more information will be coming out on phase one once we've been able to get that evaluation done.
I would suggest doing that soon.
Just
And
to add on,
not just focusing on phase two, but actually putting some time and effort into this, not fixing how you do it the next time around. But I mean, this is just that response at the same time you acknowledge the problem is just completely unacceptable. So I've said my piece. Thank you.
just
I
to add on
understand.
Jenny,
Thank you.
phase one, that's, we noticed fire truck has to have access. That's what the reason we have no parking for phase one. If you notice, there's no parking that way. Any emergency vehicle will be able to access. So now they should be able to access.
Yeah. I mean, in my case, but just while we're still on the subject, putting temporary "Don't park here" signs up is insufficient. Local traffic, local residents are not paying attention to that whatsoever. I can tell you, just using right now as an example, that with how cars are currently parked in front of my home, if my home was on fire, I would not be able to get an emergency service vehicle into my driveway, period. So if the solution is to remove parking there, then put up actual signs, or hey, here's an idea, enforce the temporary signs that you've got there. But as things stand right now, no, I'm totally at risk.
Thank you for that. We will check in with our traffic division after this meeting and have them take a look at the signage situation and the enforcement situation out there. Thank you for the comment.
Okay, next speaker is Aaron Schaefer.
Hey, yeah, thank you. And thanks to Public Works for allowing us to comment on this. I am the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee's Engineering Committee subcommittee, and unfortunately, this is the first time I'm seeing some of this too, even though we're appointed to help advise the council and the mayor on some of these projects. And so I guess I'm just going to keep my comment to one pretty big question, which is the 3-foot buffer between the street and the bikeway slated to have a mountable curb for emergency vehicles, similar to what First Avenue's reconstruction is slated to? And then if that's the case, can that be limited to just the very beginning of the block rather than the entire length? Again, similar to what you could find in a resolution passed regarding First Avenue by the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you for the question. And we do value our partnership with the Bicycle Advisory Committee. Had we had time to get to you before we came out with these changes, we would have done so as an information item for sure. Yes, your question is spot on. We will have a mountable curb against that bikeway in the 3-foot buffer. This is another way to ensure that emergency vehicles continue to have access with our narrowed travel lane, even if parking becomes, even if the parked vehicles encroach in that travel lane or there's another obstruction in the travel lane, emergency vehicles will be able to mount to that curb and make their way down the street. This is what we're doing on First Avenue South, where we also have a 1-lane, 1-way road configuration. It's important to us to be able to maintain that narrowed travel lane for the traffic calming that it presents. So that's important to us. The curb will be mountable the full length of the block, however, because we cannot limit when and where our emergency services vehicles may need to use that space in order to bypass an obstruction.
Okay, the next speaker is Gene Ross.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, thank you so much. I live on Bryant as well. at 36 in Bryant. And I'm glad you've been learning from these past mistakes, but it just seems that the whole process has been rushed. That seems to be very apparent. And to continue rushing along northward, along Bryant, when you haven't even fixed the things that went wrong in the first phase, just seems like we're going to be repeating this. And I have to tell you that concrete is not good for the environment. So to go down there and tear all that back up and change that at some point for those poor residents down there, and then continue to make mistakes that will have to be fixed, throwing this stuff into landfills, just doesn't seem like we're working on our environmental and climate change goals for our city. And I just have to tell you that the people that live here told you that you should really make sure that this has access for our emergency vehicles, that our snow plows can get down here. We asked you to do that and you blissfully ignored us. So I'm just really kind of frustrated with this whole thing. Why are you rushing along? When we haven't made, I'm sorry, I'll just stop. That's my question. Why are we rushing? You said this over and over again in your responses.
I understand, and thank you for your comment. I can hear your frustration, and it's very understandable. We have been working very fast, and we feel that too in our work in Public Works here. We are very aware of where things did not work with the design in phase one. It was a very ambitious design. It's a design we continue to be very excited about for what it does in working towards our transportation and climate goals. The revisions that we're proposing, we are trying to adhere to that as much as possible while addressing the deficiencies that we've identified with the design in phase one. I do understand it feels very fast to the public, and it feels very fast to us as well.
I would like to just say that I hope you don't put a lot of money into landscaping so that fire trucks and other emergency vehicles can drive over it during the times when they cannot get down the road without doing that. Just don't put a whole bunch of money into these swales and rain gardens and trees that are going to get mowed over by the emergency vehicles. And I don't think this can be a transit corridor anymore. It's not going to be a transit corridor. So that's not really meeting our transit goals to take something that's been an amenity for us for over 100 years.
So we are making no changes to any of the transit service or functionality from the original design, but I do want to clarify that where we are providing the bypass area for emergency vehicles is with concrete and hardscape. So we will not be mowing over landscaping. That would be concerning to us as well.
Okay, the next speaker up is Carla Hovde.
Hi, sorry, my microphone wasn't unmuting. Yeah, I have severe concerns about the fact that, from what we can tell, what the public knows, one powerful individual, well-connected individual pushed this through, and Margaret Anderson Keeler, has approved this without any community input, and it's just, it's tarnished Public Works' reputation. And I think it's entirely understandable that people can't trust this leadership and this team anymore, because what happens when the next street is being rebuilt and we all submit our comments and faithfully fill out the surveys, and then one or two powerful, well-connected people have the ability to change things at such a last minute time. We have issues like now the bike lane is going to be closer to the street, and it'll be easier for bicyclists who are not confident to get into the street accidentally. One of the things I was excited about this is the wide boulevards where large trees could be planted. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like now there are no more wide boulevards, so those large trees will not be able to be planted. I don't know how you can, talk to the public honestly and say, this is a fair and you can trust us going forward with this kind of stuff.
Thank you for your comments. I will note, member, maybe you could pull the slide up that once again compares the plan view, the two sections, the two representative samples in plan view. We will still have boulevards, wide boulevards that are plantable, and extra wide boulevards where we have the bump outs. There will still be green space along this corridor. The bikeway is still 10 feet wide and does have a substantial buffer against the street. And now we have separation, more separation between our bicyclists and our pedestrians with this design as well. This is not being pushed by any one or two quote unquote powerful individuals. These design revisions are really being driven by the feedback that we've gotten, and in particular, the concerns over emergency vehicle access. That is a life safety issue that Public Works must address, and that is why we have made these design revisions.
Okay, the next speaker up is John Edwards.
We can hear you. We are keeping the design as proposed. I'm just scrolling quickly to my notes here. Bear with me for a second. We are keeping the design as originally proposed between 38th and 36th. The block between 39th and 40th did have a chicane proposed. That's the one block where we weren't able to get another bump out proposed back in the revised design. And we're still, in all honesty, we're still working on the blocks between 32nd and Lake Street. Those ones are a bit more complicated, so more information to come in those blocks. But you're absolutely right. Where we can preserve the original design, that is what we are doing. We are working on it. And yes, we will be bringing out more graphics and sharing this information. As we noted from the beginning of this conversation, we are working very, very quickly. This is very much a design build situation at this point, and we are still working on a lot of details. So more information is going to be coming out. You're welcome.
Okay, the next speaker is Stephanie Gerzak.
Yes, hi. This is such a poorly planned project. I'm not sure if with emergency vehicles not being able to fit down a street and being a life safety issue, how was this not thought of before the construction? I have so many questions, but I think that is one of my greatest. I am a homeowner on Bryant, and I only have street parking. And the fact that the street is closed, I was also the victim of an attempted carjacking because I have to park so far away from my home. And no one can give me an answer. And now you pull up to your home and parking is taken away again. This is so frustrating. It is so poorly planned. I don't know how this passed. And the fact that phase 2 is starting on Monday and the problems and major issues with phase 1 are being set to the side, I'm not sure how that is possible and how that can happen. And another question, is parking just now closed until you can get back to phase one?
Well, first, I'm very sorry for your experience. That is horrible to hear. Second, we did plan for emergency vehicle access. Unfortunately, in many of our models, they're based on the perfect day in the most perfect conditions with the very best driver in the world. And we didn't account for enough fudge factor, I might call it, contingency in our design. We were really wanting to advance the goals and visions of our transportation action plan with this design, and we are doing that. But I think that with the corridor being so narrowed, we didn't account for what would happen during the winter months with snowbanks, with someone who might not perfectly align their vehicle, as most of us won't do from time to time, along the curb line, and what that would mean for access down the street. That's on us. And that's part of our learning here. I do not know in detail the status. From what I'm gathering here from Mbara, maybe Brian, you can chime in, but I think we have removed parking in phase one until we can figure out what adjustments need to be made to ensure that everyone has access. And I know that is a huge inconvenience for you as a resident, for your visitors. And, parking was a big conversation point during the original concept development and community engagement process for this project. I acknowledge that the project already was removing about half of the parking along the corridor, and that's very impactful for you.
So there may be no parking for the foreseeable future.
I can't answer that. I do not know, but we're going to be working on that, and we'll be sharing more information.
And the other thing, and maybe I'm not understanding it right, but the mountable curb, and I fully support parking moving to the opposite side because it doesn't work on the left side, but the mountable curb is on the side of parking. So that's not going to help emergency vehicles?
Nope, the mountable curb will be on the east side of the road against the buffer in the bikeway. So if you're looking at the picture on the screen right now, it's on the bottom side of the road.
Oh, because you're talking about phase two, you're talking about the other one way. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yes, the next speaker is Parker von Sternberg.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I guess my question is about timeline going forward. Obviously, a lot of the emotions in this are arising from a feeling that communication about the changes didn't seemingly happen at all. And this has been continued to be referred to as a proposal, as opposed to, this is just what the design is now. And also construction is, as you said, starting on Monday. So is this a proposal in the sense that it's actually being put out and there's going to be feedback and it's going to change? Or is this just what's going to start being built on Monday? And are there any dates about, is it a proposal? Is it just what's happened? Yeah. So.
Yep. Thank you for that question. It's something that is important for me to clarify here with you all today and in our communications going forward. These design revisions are moving forward. We are doing final design documents on these now in order to give them to our contractor. We are doing our work in the order of the blocks that the contractor will be working in. So we're starting down at 42nd and working our way north. When I say that, there will continue to be adjustments made to the design. And I would refer you back to the question or comment from earlier on in this Q&A session. Do we need a 3-foot buffer next to the street, or should we take 1 foot of that and reallocate the space to sidewalk or boulevard? So those types of tweaks are still under discussion, but the general reconfiguration here with the reorganization of the bikeway and the boulevard and converting chicanes to bump outs, those design changes are moving forward.
The next speaker is Jacob Wagoner.
Hi, I had a question about how the bump outs work for traffic calming. So I understand the chicane intuitively works by changing the direction that the cars have to go. So they have to slow down to change direction. With the bump outs, they don't have to change direction. Can you explain how that's still effective as traffic calming, and if it's as effective, or how effective it is relative to a chicane?
Yep, good question. Chicanes and bump outs are not the same thing, and I'm not trying to represent them as the same thing. The chicanes do force a driver to make a side-to-side movement with their vehicle to steer around the chicane. Bump outs are a different type of traffic calming. They provide more edge friction and narrow up that street space in the same way that parked vehicles will do, for example, on the side, and reinforce that narrowed travel lane, which is probably one of the most important traffic calming elements, that is in the design.
Okay, the next speaker is Dee Wheeler.
Yes. You can hear me, I take it?
I can hear you.
Okay. Do you have the drawings from 36th to 37th that you can put up?
I do not.
All right. So I've lived here, it'll be 17 years on Bryant Avenue, not too far from some other good neighbors that have been speaking today. And the thing I notice more than anything is there are between probably 10 to 15 emergency vehicles going down the street every week to Walker Methodist Home, which has hundreds of seniors living there. And it's really, it's one of those things I don't even notice it now anymore because it's so common and so often. But it's really crucial for our older neighbors to have the ability to be able to have emergency vehicles get there. And I'm kind of concerned about what I've been seeing. I was on the Board of Estimate and Taxation when I was the president of that, when we actually put aside all this money for street reconstruction. And this project was supposed to be finished in 2020, by the way. So it took a long time. And even with that, the extra time, there clearly have been some significant problems. I'm very concerned about making sure that emergency vehicles will have good access, and they can't come from just one direction. I don't think, not to that place. Okay.
Thank you.
Done.
Yep. Thank you for your comment. And yes, the engagement with Walker Methodist was very thorough with the original project concept development process. And the block you identified is one of the blocks that we are not changing the original design of. So I take your comments as double check your work, Public Works, because we did discover some deficiencies with our design with phase one. So we will take another look at that as well. So thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Yes, I will. As Ted, if there's any other hands up, it is 2:57. We do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm happy to take additional questions, but I do want to remind everyone that there are a number of questions in the chat that we likely did not get to, and we will follow up with the written summary of those comments, questions, and answers on our project website as soon as we can do that. And we will be, as noted earlier and a couple times through this conversation, having additional community meetings dedicated to this conversation. So the weekly Thursday afternoon meetings are dedicated to providing construction updates for those who are in the construction zone. It's very important that we talk to people about how to continue to get to their home or their business while the contractor's working out in front, and what to expect in terms of equipment in the area and detours and all that stuff. So Membara will be with you every Thursday afternoon providing those updates. There is a Gov delivery that you could sign up for to get emailed updates to you as well. So please sign up for that if you need or are interested in that. And please know that we will be coming back out to have far more dedicated conversation to the revised design to help answer your questions and take in your concerns and feedback. Are there any other hands raised today, Ted?
Yeah, the next one up was a Christopher Vaughn.
Christopher Vaughn. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, it just took a moment to find the unmute. Thank you for taking the questions. I live in the Lindale neighborhood and use Bryant Avenue as a cyclist, as a pedestrian, and going to a couple of the different parks with my 2 preschoolers. I echo the concerns that many people have raised about the kind of last minute seeming feeling of these changes and concerns about the transparency of the process. I think one question I wanted to ask was, the renderings that are on the screen now appear to show that the crossings at the intersections are going to be longer crossings now. Can you confirm what the change of the crossing length is, and can you explain the rationale for increasing it if it is an increase? Thank you.
Yep, it's a good question, and I don't know that we have totally worked out all of the design details at the intersections, but I will let you know that the width at some of the intersections was one of the contributing factors to our emergency vehicles having challenges with access. So we're trying to balance the life safety aspect of maintaining emergency vehicle access against the life safety aspect and Vision Zero goals of increasing safety for users of the transportation corridor. So we are trying to keep those crossing distances as short as we possibly can, while making sure that the turning movements of those larger vehicles can be accommodated safely, so that those larger vehicles aren't driving over pedestrian curb ramps as they try to make those movements.
So thank you for that answer. Can I ask a follow-up?
Absolutely.
Sure. So, from my reading in issues of pedestrian access, there's been a tension for hundreds of years between kind of the size of emergency vehicles and the needs that those bring up in terms of like traveling and passing and getting around, and then the kind of street design impacts, and then how that can widen streets and lengthen crossings, which then has that negative impact on pedestrian safety. And I know that there are some places that have looked into, okay, if we're a city and we have streets and we want the streets to be livable for all users, like we should take another look at the size of the emergency vehicles and what's the capital investments and purchasing of those things. And I know that those are long-term questions, but I'm curious if Public Works is exploring the size of some of the emergency vehicles and how that could play into the street design. I'll go off mic. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Thank you for bringing it up. And the answer is we absolutely are. We absolutely are looking at that. We absolutely are having those conversations with our fire department as an example. So yes.
And the next speaker we have now is Ray Wolo.
Yeah, thanks for taking my question. Ray Wolo here. I'm a principal geological engineer with Bar Engineering Company and a Bryant Avenue Phase 1 resident. And the question I have is regard to the staging of the demo of the rail lines. In the Phase 1, the rail lines were aggregated after removal to a common spot, and then for about 3 or 4 days there was bobcat jackhammering to remove the concrete from there. On our block, right after that, my sewer service failed, as well as the 2 owners of homes directly across the street. So all 3 of the services underneath that type of demolition and vibration failed. My service line was 11 years old. It had been replaced. I would strongly encourage the city to come up with a way to do that off-site. If you don't, I highly encourage people who are affected in phase 2 to have their sewer lines evaluated by video before this takes place, because if this occurs again, I suspect that you would have a claim to make on this type of thing, because the type of vibration on a 2 or 3 meter rail is much different than type of vibration that would occur from having concrete removal. So I'm hoping that that will indeed be the case in phase 2.
Very good comments. Membara, is there anything you want to share on that?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing this. I just want to let you know, I know it was very loud, but at the same time, I just want to let you know, in every phase of the construction, we have vibration monitored. So we were monitoring if we are in the acceptable limit. Sometimes acceptable limit looks like very wide, but that's very valuable comment, and we will try to accommodate for phase 2.
Just as a follow-up, you really, why is it that that demolition is being taken on place? Is this a cost issue? Why can't that be mobilized to another place and then that taken? It's not the nuisance. What it is it's the focused vibration vertically downward over the top of the sewer lines. You know, this is my area of expertise, and I'm telling you that that is an area that you are having a risk management vulnerability that needs to be addressed. It's ridiculous to have that not be addressed. I'll take that offline, but I'm putting that on the record.
Thank you for your comment. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for your comment.
We'll have that conversation with the contractor. Thank you. Yep. Did we lose Ted, Brian? I see another hand up. Let's see.
Yeah, we have a speaker has already spoken.
Okay. Do we want to go to
We can go.
someone who
now
hasn't had a chance
there's
yet?
2 more. Yeah, there's a
Okay.
speaker by the name of Hangatu.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I just wanted to ask, I understand that this is a very fluid design, but my question is, it does seem like the green space is being reduced. Has there been any study or clarification on what that reduction in green space means, both for the trees that were meant to be planted there and just generally in terms of the impact on the project as a whole?
Good question. I agree with you. I do think that once we have that calculation in hand, it will show a slight reduction in the amount of green space along the project corridor. We don't have that yet. We will be working on that because we will need to adjust our tree planting and landscape plans, as well as the design that we have for green stormwater infrastructure along the corridor. We'll still be attempting to maximize the amount of surface green stormwater infrastructure that we can put in place. So being able to capture the stormwater from the surface and treat it before it goes down into the ground or into the stormwater system. But given that we do anticipate this will be a reduction in green space, we do think that we'll have some additional underground storage of the stormwater that will be necessary as well. So those design details are still being worked on.
All the speakers who have requested to speak have spoken.
Okay, I see one hand up. Is this?
Chris
I can
Meyer
see you
has
on camera,
spoken.
but I don't. Oh, he has. Okay, Chris Meyer's.
No, I
spoken
haven't.
before. Okay.
I have not spoken.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
I have not spoken.
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So first, I just wanted to say, like, this feels like a pretty major change, and I really feel it should be reviewed and approved by the council, and all of these issues should be debated there. If this magnitude of change doesn't justify that, it's hard to see what kind of changes would. So I really think that the council should be reviewing this. But the change that was most disappointing to me and I wanted to understand more about was moving the bike lane closer to the street, because the barrier that was in the original design really makes it a lot safer, especially for getting kids to use it. Having that barrier just makes it feel a lot safer that the cars couldn't just run into you. So I wanted to understand why that change was made.
Sure. It's a good question. So it was really a trade-off, because in order to improve emergency vehicle access along this corridor, we either had to widen out the street in order to provide that additional space, or we could pursue this option, which we have on 4th Street downtown, which we're proposing on 1st Avenue South. And it allows for those emergency vehicles to mount the curb and use that space only when needed if they need to get through and pass an obstruction. There will still be a 5-inch curb along that buffer and that bikeway. It will feel very similar to our typical curb, which is 6 inches, but it's enough of an adjustment on that curb height that those fire trucks can easily mount up that space and bypass that obstruction. So it was really a trade-off. We didn't want to widen out that through lane because that's one of the main traffic calming elements, and I think an important part of our original design.
Thank you for that answer. I really strongly feel that trade-off should have been decided by the council. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have an additional speakers here. We have a Philip Schwartz. Next up.
I know this isn't easy for the staff to have to deal with this, but it is a very frustrating last minute change. It's definitely a downgrade for pedestrian and from pedestrian and bike standpoint. So I guess I just want to say that maybe there's some other changes that can be made to the project to improve the pedestrian and bike experience. Namely having raised crossings at all intersections. Only one of the 8 blocks that have been constructed so far had a tabled crossing. And then stoplight removal. I don't think that there should be 4 stoplights in a span of 6 blocks. That's really makes for a poor bike experience if you have to stop every block. So removing those stoplights, replacing them with 4-way stops would be a huge improvement. We have 4-way stops at 38th and Bryant, and that works well. We have one at 31st and Grand, that works well. They will work well at 31st and Bryant, 35th and 36th as well. So remove those stoplights. And then remove the Bryant Avenue stop signs at 38th Street and 33rd Street so that people riding bikes don't have to stop at minor crossings. And then I'll also just note the level of signage and just traffic control on the new portion that was reconstructed. It's a little obnoxious and I think really car centric to have these huge signs everywhere, and it kind of changes the vibe of the street, which I think should be like a beautiful, peaceful, calm street for people to enjoy, almost like a parkway in our neighborhood. So I think maybe reducing the scale and amount of signage would be just a nice touch, a nice design touch. So that's all I'll say, but particularly stoplight removal is a big thing I'd like to see.
Thank you for your comments. We have made note of those, and we will take a look at that.
Okay, the next caller up is Jim Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about what happens when you move the bike lane closer to the road. What happens when the bike lane intersects with the driveway aprons? Will this be a case where the level of the bike lane goes up and down each time it meets the driveway?
That's a really good question. And I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. Brian, do you know the answer to that?
That has been discussed, and I'm not sure what the final answer was, but we know that that's definitely not a condition we want on a bikeway, to have that roller coaster effect. And so I think that's part of the reasons why our buffer is 3 feet instead of 2 feet, is so we can take up that 5-inch difference between the trail height and the street or the gutter height there, in that 3 feet.
Excellent. Thank you for noting that.
Welcome.
Okay, we have one remaining hand up. The person's name is Cole Mullins.
Previous two people just said exactly what I was going to say. Just be a major concern if the bike lane is actually affected by the slope of the driveways at all. I think that would just be pretty unacceptable, but I think you guys understand that. And then just a +1 on the raised crosswalks, or even just entire raised intersections, as another form of traffic calming, of creating a bump up, sort of like how, they have on the new part of the Minnehaha Parkway, or kind of like you have in the proposed change, but for the entire intersection. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. I will note, do we have one
Sorry.
more? They just keep coming up.
We had one additional hand pop up, a person by the name of Ben.
Ben. Okay, we're going to take Ben's question, and then we are 15 minutes over our time today. I suspect that people will keep asking questions, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we will wrap up today's meeting, but please know that we will be back out. We will be having further conversation here. So Ben, you get the last question of the day.
What an honor. I just wanted to flag the importance of hard barriers between the bike lanes and travel lanes. I've had the tremendous good fortune of spending a lot of time cycling on 40th and on Blaisdell this winter, and I'm really grateful for how well Public Works has done keeping those bike lanes open and accessible to cyclists. It's been tremendous. But with that has come any number of delivery vehicles, or even cars just driving in the bike lane, including a few times when I've almost been hit by cars that have decided to drive in the bike lane. So I would strongly encourage maintaining hard barriers between travel lanes and bikeways.
Okay, thank you. We agree. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Thank you for your questions and comments. And I wish you all well, and we will see you again soon.